It's a beautiful morning.
This is my favorite time to skate. I guess it's from all those years of 5 a.m. practices. But it's also the time when the pain and stiffness of osteoarthritis can be at their worst.
Ask your doctor about ways to help relieve the pain of osteoarthritis. Call 1-888-MERC55 for more information.
Beautiful morning.
September 30th, 2004, the drug Vioxx was pulled from the market by its producer Merck, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. This drug was used for treating osteoarthritis and was pulled when it was discovered that it doubles your risk of heart attack. When it was pulled from the market, around 20 million Americans had taken Vioxx. The incident was a big deal back in the day, and it put a spotlight on the pharmaceutical industry's practice of advertising drugs to the public, especially ones that had not fully gone through the proper certification processes, such as Vioxx. While Vioxx is a more modern example of the problem of direct-to-consumer advertising, the issue of pharmaceutical ads has plagued us for decades. Going back to the 70s, people have been debating this issue, which culminated in two Supreme Court cases, Bigelow v. Virginia in 1975, which was over advertising abortion in newspapers, and Virginia State Board of Pharmacy versus Virginia Citizens Consumer Council in 1976, which was about advertising prescription drug prices. In the latter case, Justice Harry Blackmun wrote the majority opinion, and in that opinion he writes, "In the case of our hypothetical pharmacist, he may now presumably advertise not only the prices of prescription drugs, but may also attempt to energetically promote their sale so long as he does so truthfully." He then cites some examples for acceptable ads, such as "Can't shake the flu? Get a prescription for tetracycline from your doctor today." Or more concerningly, "Don't spend another sleepless night. Ask your doctor to prescribe Seconal without delay." The last quote is the most concerning one. Seconal is a drug to help with insomnia and is sometimes used to calm a person before surgery. It was phased out of mainstream use because it had serious reactions with things like alcohol, in which it will slow your breathing, leading to death. The withdrawal symptoms aren't any better, with hallucinations and seizures in severe cases. But not only is the drug itself concerning, the part about asking your doctor is even more concerning. In a health affairs paper titled Direct-to-Consumer Prescription Drug Advertising, Trends, Impact, and Implications, they found 35% of people asked their doctor about drugs they have seen adverts for on TV, and 17% of those people asked their doctors to prescribe those drugs. They also found that when the doctor denies these requests, 46% of people are disappointed, 25% try to change their doctor's minds, 24% ask a different doctor for the drug, and 15% get mad and switch to a different doctor. I expect these numbers to be a little low for reasons I explain later, but they prove my point anyway. Now, these numbers are concerning for obvious reasons, but if you look a little farther into this problem, it gets worse. According to that same paper, when a panel of pharmacists were shown ads, only 65 of the adverts presented the risks and benefits in a fair, balanced way, meaning that a significant amount of people asking about these drugs don't even know the full risks or how much benefit you might get from these products, leading to much suffering and disappointment. All this talk about the issue might lead you to ask, why isn't this type of advertising illegal? It's hard to say, because commercial speech is protected by the First Amendment because of the Bigelow v. Virginia case we talked about earlier. This might have you asking, what is commercial speech? Well, it's defined as any speech which promotes at least some type of commerce. You might think that definition is super vague, because it is. Under this definition, laws that put people in prison for offering to sell minors drugs and alcohol would be considered unconstitutional. To prevent legal issues like that, courts use what's called the Central Hudson Test, which is a series of criteria that, if reached, allows regulation to commercial speech. The criteria being, is the advertisement lawful and non-misleading? Does the government have a substantial interest, such as advancing public health? Would the regulation directly and materially advance the government's substantial interest? And is the regulation narrowly tailored? Legal scholars have many issues with this test, such as Robert Post of Yale Law, who has written that the test is, quote, so vague and abstract as to fail entirely to express any specific constitutional values. The court system doesn't think so, though, as this test has been standard since 1980. Another issue that stops legislation is that, as Yale's Post put it, to ban direct-to-consumer drug advertising for new drugs, there would have to be something particularly unsafe about the drugs. But that raises the question, what about the list of side effects at the end of commercials? Well, those advertisements are approved by the FDA before they air, which means the FDA thinks that the health concerns are not particularly unsafe. But this has been proven false time and time again. Some examples are Vioxx, which I talked about earlier, which didn't finish the whole certification process, and more recently, the COVID-19 vaccine, which even on emergency authorization has been allowed to advertise without long-term studies. In both cases, the drugs have been shown to have undisclosed cardiovascular effects when advertised. One big factor in any regulation is that there's a doctor in between the consumer and the product, which, as shown before, isn't as effective as people think, as people will keep going to the doctors until one thinks that it is the right choice to prescribe the drug. One thing holding back the effort to expose some of these issues is that there is no money to be made in science 90% of the time. Unless you make a new material, drug, or technology, the fact is that your experiments will be a financial drain to your organization, almost 100% of the time. So donations are the main source of funding, which seems like a win-win situation at face value. The donator gets a tax write-off, and the scientist can make important discoveries. The real picture is not as simple. Pharmaceutical companies are major donors to a lot of research organizations, and if the research organization is known for outing companies, none of them are going to donate, leaving scientists focused on research to focus on other things. I ran into this problem while writing this video, as most research studies and articles on this topic are from before 1990 to 2000, which to me means the numbers are past their expiry date, and most certainly are wrong to modern audiences. The studies I did end up using were written around 2004, so I expect the numbers to be a little low, as advertising has only gotten more prevalent and effective since 2 decades ago, when social media wasn't as big as now. I see this even in my personal life. I remember seeing ads for drugs every so often as a kid just living life. But now with how prevalent the internet is in daily life, I run into so many more ads for these prescription drugs than I ever was exposed to as a kid. To look at the bright side of things, until super recently, both parties in the American political system both agreed that pharmaceutical companies don't really ever commonly act in the benefit of the American people, meaning legislation is constantly being brought to vote to heavily regulate or even outright ban pharmaceutical advertising. As mentioned in the segment of the video about the legality of this particular type of advertising, it is tough to put laws in place to limit these ads, but clever people in Congress have been slowly restricting things like this for many years, and it is only a matter of time before the practice is outright banned, which will be a sigh of relief for everyone.